Welcome to the Sessions College Photo Contest Critique. And this is one of Session College Photoshop and Photography instructors, Taz Talley, and I'll be performing the critique today. First, I'd like to say congratulations to Lisa Boone for her winning entry, the image that you see here. Now let's just dive right into the critique. Well, first of all, what's the purpose of a critique? Well, a critique is designed to be a constructive evaluation of an image to identify the positive aspects of the image that you'd like to enhance and continue as you continue your photography and your artwork, and also to identify maybe some areas of the image that may be a little bit weaker that you'd like to improve upon. And the intent is always very constructive, and the intent of a critique is to improve your ability as an artist, in this case as a photographer, so that you are constantly improving. All right, so let's dive right into the critique. Well, one of the first things that I do when I look at an image to critique it, I just ask myself the simple question, is this image visually interesting? And we can certainly answer yes to Lisa's image here. We have this nice high contrast image of the night sky, uh, forming a really dark high contrast background for those beautiful lights in the middle ground of the image, and also these beautiful reflections off the water. So yeah, this is a visually compelling image that I'd like to look at a little bit more. So passes muster in terms of that. The next thing that I do is I go through a fairly disciplined set of image evaluations. And for this critique, I'd like to really focus on the composition. And there's four things that I take a look at. I look at the overall simplicity of the image. I look at the asymmetry, the eye line, and then the point of view. And then I kind of bundle all those all together and look at the strengths and the weaknesses of the image. So let's start with simplicity. There's really three parts to simplicity when I do an evaluation of an image. First thing I say, how many major components are there in the image? Because the more components you have in an image, the more elements, the more likely you are to have a complex or confusing image. So a good rule of thumb is I like to have 4 or fewer primary components in an image. Let's count them here. We have the foreground, which is 1, I think it's the bike path. 2 is the beautiful reflections off the river. 3 is we have this beautiful night skyline, and then 4, this background, the black night sky. So we've got 4 elements, so it kind of meets that criteria of having 4 or fewer elements. All right, so that we're good there. Second, I look at each one of those components and say, how complex are they? And remember, our goal here is simplicity in images, because the more complex an image is, the more visually confusing it is, and the less pleasant it is to look at. The less compelling it is as an image, the more complex it is. So let's just break down these 4 components. Foreground portion of the image, pretty simple. And one of the things I look at here when I look at the complexity or simplicity of each component is there detail and can I see it? All right? And I can certainly see most of the detail of the image here. There's a little bit that I can't see down in here, but overall, not too bad here. On the river itself, there's lots of detail in the reflections, and we can see them. Remember, detail and complexity are not the same thing. It's nice to have detail, we just want to be able to distinguish it. So this is a real strength of the image. Okay, and then the night skyline. When we look across the night skyline, there's really kind of 2 portions to this. There's the right side of the image, and then the left in terms of the night skyline. Let's focus first on the right side. Beautiful portion of the image. One of the real strengths of this image is this night skyline. Why? Because there's lots of detail here, but it's all very visible. Do you see that? You can really distinguish lots of detail. In contrast, the left side of the image is a little bit more complex. You see you have overlapping image elements here with the bridge and then the background. There's detail, but some of it's hidden because of the overlapping nature of this. So this is a real strength. This is less strong in terms of the overall complexity of the image. And then finally, when we look at the night sky, there's a big negative space up here. And as you probably know, negative space is good, but like most things, a little bit goes a long way. And one of the questions that I asked earlier on was, is there detail and can we see it? And if there's not a lot of detail in some portion of the image, it's okay to have negative space, but too much can be a detractor. We'll return to that when we come back to see how we might enhance this image a little bit later. So we see the real strengths of the portion of this image are the beautiful reflections and then the night skyline, particularly the right side of this image. All right, and then finally, in terms of simplicity, is separation. Are the components, the composition elements in the image separated from each other? And we have foreground, middle ground, background night sky, the background skyline, and then the night sky. And you can see clearly good separation between the night sky and then the skyline. Nice separation between the water with the reflections and and this portion of the image with the skyline, and then there's pretty darn good separation here. Not quite as good. There's a little bit of confusion along here, but overall there's good separation. All right? So again, the real strengths of this image, all right, the right-hand portion of the night sky and these beautiful reflections. All right, now how about asymmetry? When we try to compose good quality images, images that really capture someone's vision when they look at the image, asymmetry is something that we shoot for. Rather than having everything centered, it's nice to offset some of the components. And when I look at this image, I see particularly the two strength areas, right, is the night skyline, particularly the right side of this image. Notice it's just a little bit higher over here and lower over here. And this composition, of course, is reflected in the reflections that come off of the water. And when we look down at the foreground, all right, the left side of this image is different than the right. And when I perform this asymmetrical analysis, and there's lots of ways to do this, right, there's the rule of thirds and the golden mean. One of the things that I do is I take a horizontal line in my mind's eye, and I draw it down vertically, a vertical line rather, and then a horizontal line through the middle. And then I ask myself, are the top and the bottom and the left and the right different? And then are all four quadrants different from each other? In this case, the answer is yes. So this is a nicely asymmetrical image. Then, eye lines. Eye lines are so important in an image because remember we're working with two-dimensional media here in photography, and we're trying to make it very often dynamic and three-dimensional, and eye lines is one of the ways that we can do that. And asymmetry and eye lines feed into each other, as we see here. Nice asymmetrical skyline, night skyline, and that creates a beautiful eye line. How can your eye not follow along the top of this image here? Right? Same thing in the river, is that there's lights along the river which are a reflection of this night skyline. You know, our eye just wants to move across here. Even in the foreground, which is not quite as compelling, but still, you know, we have this bike path that moves across here from left to right. So there's some very, very nice eye lines in this image, some physical eye lines. And notice that we go from light to dark, right, which moves our eye across the image as well. All right, so we have a fairly simple image, some very strong components. We have some good asymmetry, some nice eye lines in this image. And finally, we ask ourselves, is the point of view compelling here? Is it a good point of view? And, you know, this is a nightscape, a skyscape. And, you know, we have a good balance between what we see here with the night skyline and the water. There's not too much water. There's not too little water. So I think the point of view of this image is actually pretty good. Could we have some different points of view, maybe lower or higher angle? Sure. But I think it's appropriate for this image. All right, so we've done our overall composition critique. Now we can ask ourselves, you know, what might we do to improve this image? Well, if I could reshoot this image, certainly I would go out, I would try to emphasize this beautiful portion of the image we have here. Don't want to lose these beautiful reflections. And if I could try to simplify the left-hand portion of this image, I would. But if we can't reshoot the image, what if this is the image we've got, and it's a good image as we've seen, which is why it won the photo contest. Is there something we might do to this image to maybe improve it a little bit? Well, indeed, let's take a look. And one of the things that I'd like to do is talk about, just briefly, in the mind's eye, what could we do to enhance these beautiful qualities of this image? How about a crop? Let's talk about the power of the crop for just a minute. If I can take this image and I'm going to move it into the crop space, and I'm working inside of Lightroom here, and I again review what are the areas of this image which are really strong. And it's this night skyline here and these beautiful reflections. We've got all this negative space. Negative space is good, but a little bit goes a long way. So what I would recommend on this image is taking this image as is, even without reshooting, and then moving down and getting rid of some of that negative space that we see here, emphasizing the visual strengths of this image, which are the night skyline and the reflections off of this water. And then I'm going to hit that enter key. And notice I'm giving myself, I'm not moving the crop down too much, so I'm constricting it, all right? Giving it a little bit of breathing room, right? And then when I hit the enter key, I say, wow, I like that. That looks very, very nice. And notice that by getting rid of some of that negative space, we're going to be improving that night skyline or visual attention to that. Could we go further? Sure. Let's make a second copy of this image. And let's go to the crop tool once again. And I ask myself, again, what's the important portion of this image? Beautiful night skyline, beautiful reflections. The foreground is okay, but it's not compelling, is it? Right? So what we could do is we could take and do this even more. We can even crop up from the bottom. Now notice there's a logo here, of course, which kind of interferes a little bit visually, but that's okay. And I'm just going to hit that Enter key again. I'm going to move this up just enough. I'm going to keep these nice silhouettes here and these nice lights that we have, but I'm going to remove most of the foreground portion, which I find less interesting. Boom. And you say, wow, that really emphasizes the portions of this image. And then now let's take a look at all three of these images together. Right? The original image, the first crop, and then the second crop. And we can see the progression, and I think that you would agree that the final crop that we have here really emphasizes the strongest portions of this image. So we can remove that middle crop, but you can see the progression of thought there. So there's the critique for the image and some suggestions for enhancing the really strong portions of this image and what we can do to further improve the image that we have before us. So again, congratulations to Lisa for a very fine image, and I hope you enjoyed this critique.